One, two, one, two, one, two, two, three. One of those, 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 one of those. One, two, one, two. Yes, no. One of those, one of those, one of those, one of those. One, two, one, two. You may leave it up? Huh? Huh?
Okay, go ahead. Do you know how to do it?
One of those, one of those, one of those, one of those.
Like that light work? I like that light work.
I think it looks good.
Yeah, those floods just, they were nice, but they weren't quite enough. The drop shadow is a little unfortunate, but.
Yeah.
There's if you're a visitor, try it. See what you can do pages with it. Or you can sit right in front of you. Or you can sit right here where you can maybe you can see it yourself. It's right there. So you guys not right from down here?
Yeah, look at the feet.
Yeah, they do those. It's like, they never did. Remember the desk inside the microwave shop? Two sides of the microwave shop. Directors remain. You're the morning guy for one, right? Yeah. We're not finished the last one. It was cool to work. It was a Dawn Waiter station.
Really? Yeah, it's not.
I'm sure it did.
You're here? Am I going to be
No, not at all. Just the standing ovations. Okay. Watch.
like read answers? Yep. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Right down there. It's the bus.
There it is.
After the conference is over, the chief's going to stick around. You guys will have 5 minutes max to do one-on-one. Literally get it all done today. I think some of the fake guys will hang around.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
You want me to work down here? I'm going to use the phone line anyway. That's what I was calling to tell you. I'm going to use this one right so hey, Jess, can you? Hey, I'm going to be on that speech. Let me know if the audience on it. Let me know if you come down. Let me know if you're on the air. Let me know if you want to zoom out for the white shot for a moment. Zoom back in. I'm going to hang up this call. That's all I do right now. I'll just talk to you about 30 seconds. No, it doesn't be yeah, let me call and then talk to me in about 30 seconds and I'll give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down. But But so you're gonna go right into the.
Oh, you bet. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Jesse, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Jesse, can you talk to me? Test 1 2, test 1 2. Any of you guys need a test while I'm up here? Test 1 2, test 1 2. I hear you, Jesse. I hear you, Jesse. Test 1 2, test 1 2. I'm doing a test for the other cameras out here as well. You guys good? Okay. Lighting look okay? Lighting look okay?
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us as we convene today to discuss, for the final time, Damasio Diaz and Patrick Mara. These were two men that, because of their self-serving and narcissistic behavior, not only tarnished their reputations, but their badges and disgraced the Bakersfield Police Department. This was a very lengthy and exhaustive investigation conducted by the Department of Justice, and in the end, they determined that these two men were the only two employees of the Bakersfield Police Department that were criminally culpable in this investigation. Standing behind me are representatives from the DOJ, the FBI, the IRS, the DEA, and the Bakersfield Police Department. I apologize if I forgot any. They're going to individually come up and explain their role in the investigation, and at the end, answer any questions that they can. At the conclusion of this press conference, the chief and some of the representatives from these offices behind me will stick around and answer any questions one-on-one but time is going to be limited, so please make sure that you have all your questions ready and that you get all your questions asked and answered. So I'd like to first introduce the acting United States Attorney of the Eastern District of California, Mr. Phillip Talbert.
Thanks. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here today. Again, my name is Phil Talbert. I'm the acting United States Attorney for the Eastern District of California. Earlier today at the federal courthouse in Fresno, former Bakersfield Police Detective Patrick Mara was sentenced to 5 years in prison for drug trafficking. Mara also forfeited $80,000 as proceeds from the scheme. This follows the earlier sentencing of his partner, former Detective DiMaggio Diaz, to 5 years in prison for his role in the same scheme. Diaz was also ordered to pay over $40,000 in restitution and forfeited $79,000. As detailed in our filings in court, Diaz and Mara engaged in a conspiracy over a period of years to distribute and possess with the intent to distribute methamphetamine, large amounts of crystal methamphetamine. Diaz and Mara were both assigned Bakersfield PD's narcotics unit and also the Southern Tri-County Task Force of the high-intensity drug trafficking area. As such, both were responsible for investigating drug traffickers. In May of this year, Diaz pleaded guilty to 3 criminal charges. First, Diaz pleaded guilty to federal programs bribery. The evidence showed that Diaz operated a criminal informant named Guillermo Magallanes, also known as Memo. Diaz knew that Memo continued to engage in large-scale drug trafficking while he was an informant, but worked with him as an informant anyway. Memo paid bribes to Diaz for protection and information, and Diaz supplied it. Second, Diaz pleaded guilty to conspiracy to distribute and possess with intent to distribute methamphetamine. On September 20th, 2012, Diaz and Mara had a canine officer stop a vehicle, inside of which were 10 pounds of crystal methamphetamine. The canine officer turned the scene over to Diaz and Mara, who booked only 1 pound into evidence, keeping 9 pounds of methamphetamine for themselves. Later, Diaz and Mara sold the 9 pounds and pocketed the proceeds. Our investigation concluded that the canine officer did not know Diaz and Mara kept 9 pounds for their own further sale and was not knowingly involved in their criminal conduct. Third, Diaz pleaded guilty to failing to report on his federal income taxes $97,900 he received as part of the methamphetamine trafficking scheme, profit he had received for his role. In June, Mara pleaded guilty to 1 charge, conspiracy to distribute and possess with intent to distribute methamphetamine. He acknowledged as part of his plea that he was responsible for distributing over 20 pounds of methamphetamine. The crimes that Diaz and Mara committed put pounds and pounds of crystal methamphetamine out on the street and into our community in Bakersfield, where it undoubtedly fueled addictions and helped ruin lives. The way they did it, by enlisting unwitting fellow police officers to help them conduct unofficial, unplanned, unsupervised operations, endangered those officers and the public. Traffic stops like the one they enlisted the canine officer for in September 2012 had not been reviewed for safety and did not use appropriate backup. Their actions risked their fellow officers' safety for their own greed. Moreover, by protecting a confidential informant that he knew was illegally trafficking in drugs in return for bribes, Diaz undermined his police department's crime-fighting efforts and potentially compromised law enforcement operations. Again, Diaz did this out of greed. Police officers like Diaz and Mara are sworn to uphold and enforce the law as they serve the public and keep it safe. Assigned to investigate and build cases against drug traffickers, though, they became the drug traffickers themselves. Diaz and Mara abused their authority as police officers and harmed the very community they had promised to serve. They betrayed their fellow police officers, putting officer lives at risk and undermining the work their colleagues were doing. Their actions have endangered the community's faith in its law enforcement agencies. Keeping the public safe is something the Bakersfield Police Department needs the public's help and trust to accomplish. Public corruption like this can reduce that trust, making law enforcement's job that much harder. When the public learns that police officers who are supposed to be enforcing the law have been violating that very law, particularly under circumstances like these involving huge amounts of harmful, illegal drugs, people's faith in law enforcement is understandably shaken. And the police who are dedicated to performing their jobs honestly and with integrity must work to regain that community's trust. This investigation started with DEA and Bakersfield Police Department focused on another drug trafficker. Intercepted phone conversations indicated that Memo was buying methamphetamine from that other trafficker. Then Memo was intercepted warning him not to use his phone anymore, suggesting that Memo had been tipped off about the wire. Later, when agents arrested Memo for methamphetamine sales, he told them about Diaz providing him protection and information in return for money. With the investigation taking a public corruption turn, the FBI joined the case and also IRS to work on the financial angle. But the agents needed help with examining Diaz's past drug seizures, both the evidence seized and the written reports that were completed, to see if Memo's allegations about Diaz could be corroborated. It was at that point that my predecessor, then U.S. reached out to Chief Williamson personally to ask for his assistance in the investigation. The chief did not hesitate and immediately offered his full cooperation. He assigned two of his top detectives, Paul Yoon and Patrick Hayes, to assist in the investigation, which was otherwise kept quiet within the Bakersfield Police Department. Paul Yoon was already well known in my office because he had worked closely with us on a number of cases arising from a financial crimes task force. In fact, the last time I was in this room in 2013 was when Ben Wagner, then the U.S. Attorney, presented Detective Yoon with a U.S. Attorney's Award for his outstanding work with our office. Both Diaz and Mara initially lied to the investigating agents about their criminal conduct. It was only after he realized that the evidence indicated his guilt that Diaz acknowledged his conduct and pointed a finger at Mara. Mara also lied to the agents at first, acknowledging the truth only after Diaz implicated him. During the course of the investigation, the investigative team followed the facts where they took them. The team investigated a number of related drug trafficking allegations, including allegations that Diaz later made against unnamed BPD officers in a public filing in his case. After investigating every one of these allegations, the team concluded that two Bakersfield police officers had committed criminal conduct, Diaz and Mara. With today's sentencing, we've now completed our prosecution of the two of them. While this investigation itself is not complete, I do not anticipate any other criminal charges being brought against Bakersfield Police Department officers relating to these allegations. I want to thank my federal partners who are up here on the stage with me, from the FBI, the DEA, the IRS, for their careful professional work on this investigation. I also want to thank Chief Williamson for the critical assistance he provided to the investigative team and for his unwavering support throughout the entire process. This has been a real team effort. A special thank you goes to the investigative team itself of Justin Badger and Rich Snodgrass of the FBI, Chris Grimm of the DEA, Andrew Moreno of the IRS, and of course Paul Yoon and Patrick Hayes of the Bakersfield Police Department. Thanks to each of you for your hard work on this case. I also want to thank the two attorneys from my office for their great work on this case, Brian Delaney and Angela Scott. We opened our Bakersfield office early last year to better serve the growing population of Bakersfield and Kern County. Assistant U.S. Attorneys Delaney and Scott have done a fantastic job here in the southern portion of our district. In addition to prosecuting this case, they have worked on a number of cases of importance to this region, including the Whittington hate crime case and the Carranza-Sanchez alien smuggling fraud case, each of which is currently set for trial. In fact, our Bakersfield office and our law enforcement partners here have been so productive that we've recently made the decision to move a third Assistant U.S. Attorney position down here to the Bakersfield office. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Hoover. I'm the Assistant Special Agent in charge for the DEA in Sacramento. You know, this case started as a pretty typical drug investigation, and like many others, we see how drug trafficking invites other types of crimes. In this case, out of greed, Patrick Mara decided to take the easy money that drug trafficking offers. And unfortunately, this isn't the only case in the district over the past couple of years that we've seen that involves public corruption and drug trafficking. And here's a sad fact. Drug abuse today in this country is worse than it's ever been. Every day in America, 129 people die from a drug overdose. That's more people than die from car crashes. It's more people that he swore to protect and serve. That's a tragedy too. First, because, you know, we need to remember drugs are insidious and they destroy lives. And second, what he did shatters public trust. And cops everywhere pay the price for that. The people in this room are paying the price for that. But in contrast, this case is an example of the great work that in fact takes place every day in Kern County. The investigative team that includes the Bakersfield Police Department did their jobs. It was a tough job, but they did their jobs, and they should be proud of their work. So I'd like to thank Chief Williamson, the FBI, the IRS, and the U.S. Attorney's Office for what was, by all accounts, a model for collaboration. You know, the DEA is committed to the communities that we serve. We live in these communities, and we look forward to working with our law enforcement partners on projects in the future that make our communities a safer place to live and work. Thanks.
Good afternoon. My name is Jose Moreno. I am the supervisory senior resident agent. Basically, I'm in charge of the FBI office here in Bakersfield. And I'll tell you real quickly, just basically our involvement in this investigation. It commenced in February of 2015 when we initiated an investigation into the corrupt activities of Damasio Diaz, and that subsequently led to Patrick Mara, who, as you know, was sentenced today. Counterparts from the DEA, IRS, and Bakersfield Police Department wasted no time in joining this investigation, and together working hand in hand with our United States Attorney's Office, we came to another successful conclusion today. The FBI would like to also extend our gratitude to these valuable law enforcement partners, the IRS, DEA, and our counterparts here from Bakersfield PD. The American people have given police officers awesome authority. Men and women, as you see today here, use that authority to keep us safe each and every day. Patrick Mara and his corrupt colleague betrayed that trust. They disgraced the profession of law enforcement and added to the burden of their colleagues who put daily their lives on the line with absolute integrity. The FBI and our partners will remain ever vigilant to continue to identify and root out corruption, because honest public service is the foundation of the law enforcement profession and our great nation. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Mike Batdorf. I'm the special agent in charge with IRS Criminal Investigation in the Oakland Field Office. I also want to obviously extend my thanks to the collaborative team here today. That collaboration and working together as a law enforcement community it should be a model for those going forward on how this all comes together. Today's sentencing of Mr. Mara and that of Mr. Diaz a couple weeks ago should send notice to anyone contemplating short-term gains over their sworn oath to serve and protect. It does not pay. Law enforcement officers at the local, state, and federal levels are rightfully held to a higher standard. IRSCI will continue to follow the money. Where is it coming from? Where is it going? Is it being used to buy assets, boats, cars, houses? And even in some circumstances, do they actually file and pay taxes on illegal gotten gains? We'll continue to devote our resources to investigate those who choose greed over service.
Okay, good afternoon. I believe I've spoke with many of you quite extensively about this case over the last year and a half or so. I can tell you that on a day in February 2015, I was contacted by our agent in charge, Jose Moreno from the FBI, that an investigation was going to be conducted and was underway currently on disgraced officer, Detective then Damasio Diaz. This is a public corruption case that I was notified of. Later on, we were asked if we could provide resources to the investigation, which we gladly provided. It was later determined that Detective Patrick Mara was also involved in the public corruption case, and another investigation piggybacking off the one that was already started commenced at that point. Now we're to this point where both officers have been indicted, or both former officers, I guess, have been indicted. I think it goes a long way to show the teamwork that all of us have had, and it's just not this group of people. It takes a lot of people to put an investigation like this. I think that our U.S. Attorney of the Eastern District, Phil Talbot, did an excellent job in saying that there was no other officers involved in this corruption scandal. They investigated every name that came up, uncovered every rock, and no one else's name came to light in their scandal. We have also done internal investigations on many allegations that were made, and once again have been able to uncover nothing. It was quite an extensive investigation, obviously. I believe I was told that 5 years worth of narcotics in our property room was gone through with every report that was done in the entire department, and the only narcotics that were missing were associated with Diaz and Mara only. So the extent and the breadth of the investigation was quite extensive. As I said, it was over 18 months or so to come to this point. Now in regards to the sentencing of both Mara and Diaz, I would say this. I remember probably 3 weeks ago when Mr. Diaz emerged from the courtroom and claimed that it was a victory for him. I find no victor in this incident or in these incidents. I don't think the police officers here are victorious. I don't think our community at large is victorious. I don't think the men and women that wear that badge courageously, with honor, and go out and protect and serve either are victorious. I would say I don't believe that Mr. Diaz, even though he thinks he is victorious, is. I don't believe that his family is, that he's going to leave behind for numerous years, and I feel the same about Mr. Mara. Not only their immediate families, but their extended families, who are generally upstanding citizens in the Bakersfield community and the McFarland community. As we move forward, we will move past this. Obviously, we have members of our department have violated the public trust at this time. As it's eroded, we need to build it back up. And that's what we'll be working on. We've been working through a lot of issues over the last year and a half. With that said, I'd like to just once again compliment all the people, all the individuals, all the law enforcement agencies that were involved in the investigation to bring it to this conclusion. And I don't know, we're going to ask and do questions now, or is someone else going to talk? No? Okay, so we'll open up to questions if you want to talk to...
Mr. Talbert, I have a question from Mr. Talbert.
Yes.
Yeah. I want to know, just to clarify, besides taking those 10 pounds of methamphetamine, it's stated that Diaz and Mara would enlist the help of other BPD patrol officers to stop cars, and that the patrol officer would only take a fraction of the drugs that were contained in those cars, and Mara and Diaz would take the rest. Has your investigation found whether any officers were complicit, and to what extent they were complicit, if they knew what was going on, and how many officers actually did this?
So Our finding was actually a little bit different. We concluded that no officers were complicit in joining Diaz and Mara. What they would do is they would direct an officer to make a traffic stop, as they did in the September 2012 incident, and the officer wouldn't know what was going on. The officer might notice that something was a little strange because there wasn't backup, there wasn't kind of the usual setup, but these were two experienced detectives in narcotics who were asking for their assistance in creating the setup, and then they would take over the scene and they would take the evidence. So there were, in addition to this one where 10 pounds became 1 pound booked into evidence and 9 pounds of profit to the two detectives, there were other incidents where it was an ounce, or a half an ounce would be booked into evidence and a half an ounce would be kept by the detective for sale, or it would never be booked into evidence. And there were a number, at least a dozen or 15 or so, 10 to 12 of these sorts of incidents. And one thing that the investigative team looked at was who were the officers, these other officers involved in these things. And if you'd think that if there was one officer or two officers who were consistently involved, then that would be suspicious and might indicate complicity and cause us to look even harder at those officers. Each of these had a different officer involved. So it wasn't something where they planned it out and they did it in a way to allay suspicions, not to create more suspicions than there might already be.
And then I understand that Diaz and Mara would take the drugs and sell those drugs to a third party, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Which third party was that?
The investigation's ongoing.
Is that part of the ongoing investigation?
The investigation's ongoing. So there are some things I can answer and some things I can't. So,
What
thank you.
about the property acquired by Mara and Diaz? Do they get to keep all their properties, cars, homes?
So what happened there was our investigation estimated amounts of money, and there were orders of forfeiture as to each officer. Each former officer is going to have to come up with money to pay off the order of forfeiture, and with respect to Diaz, there was also an order of restitution.
Can you assure the public then once again that no other officer was in any way, shape, or form involved in the illegal activities?
Yes, I can. So this, as you see, this is not just Bakersfield PD that conducted this investigation. We've got 3 federal partners up here on the stage with me. We conducted an exhaustive investigation. We've got 2 experienced prosecutors from our office who ran this, and there was no evidence pointing to criminal conduct by anyone else with Bakersfield Police Department other than these 2. And when the allegations are, hey, you wouldn't believe all these other things that are going on, and then the investigation comes right back to the 2 of them as far as conducting that, that's what we based our criminal case on with respect to BPD officers.
Chief, how difficult is it going to be to convince the public or regain the confidence of the public when the consequences, 5-year sentences, doesn't seem to be in line with what an ordinary person would be facing if they did this?
Well, I don't know what the appropriate sentence is for these individuals, but I do have to appreciate, for lack of a better term, the judge's decision on that. I don't know much about the federal guidelines on sentencing, but because I'm a man of justice, and this is a system of justice, I have to accept the judge's decision on the 5-year terms. In regards to the public trust, I think that we've been working very hard over the last 3 or 4 years in numerous venues, building trust with our community here, and I think we have great support. We have one of the most supportive communities that I know of in partnership with law enforcement. So I think we'll continue to work in that fashion, and I hope that somehow, some way, the media determines or decides to print that these 2 officers were the only ones involved in this incident, and it's not widespread corruption and a going to read like a novel, like one of the defendant's attorneys was quoted as saying. So I hope that that is put to rest today as well.
Now, could the U.S. Attorney answer the question about because I know you'd asked for much stiffer sentences. How do you convince the public that they didn't get a company discount?
Well, because the judge took all these arguments into account, and this is
Do you think the public is going to buy that?
I think they need to listen to the judge's reasoning and understand that Look, the judge follows guidelines and weighs statutory factors. Federal process. Each side gets to make arguments. The judge considered a lot of different factors, and in the end decided that 5 years was the appropriate sentence for each of these two defendants. We argued for more, but I respect the judge's decision. He considered all of our their chance to speak. Today they were asking for less. We were asking for more. The judge explained his reasoning on the record. He was very clear in the way that he saw the case. He made it clear that he considered that two police detectives, former police detectives with absolutely no criminal history, going to prison for 5 years, he thought of as a very significant punishment. And I think it is a significant punishment, too.
Chief, in your investigation, did you find anything that officers violated BPD policy in letting Mara and Diaz go away with the rest of the drugs, and they only took a part of it?
What you must remember is it's a federal investigation, and names were handed over to us to do internal investigations are. You know as well as I do, we've been through this a million times, that Government Code 3300 doesn't allow me to discuss the issues in a personnel disciplinary manner. I can tell you that 4 of the 5 individuals are back to work, and 1 person has resigned from the force.
Okay, so just for the public out there, they still obviously have some very grave doubts as to how these others could have been unwittingly, what's the word?
Who has the grave doubts?
The public out there that we've been getting comments about how these officers could not have known, or why they let Diaz and Mara.
I'll let the U.S. Department of Justice handle that, answer that question, because they're the ones that did the investigation.
And as I said before, for us to bring a criminal case, we have to have evidence of criminal wrongdoing. Here, we did not conclude that any of the patrol officers, and remember, as I mentioned before, these were different individual officers in each one of these cases. This was not 1 or 2 officers who helped Diaz and Mara through all of these different incidents. It's one after another, someone different. And so we concluded after, how long an investigation?
Since February 2015.
February 2015. We put a fair amount of time into this with 3 different federal agencies and BPD, and didn't find any evidence of criminal conduct other than these 2. And it's a mountain of criminal conduct against the 2 of them.
So if they're
Enough that they both pled guilty.
If they're lying, shouldn't their plea deals be thrown out and then they be charged with lying under oath?
For lying about
the other officers involved, other people's knowledge, paying other officers pulling them over drunk, all of these accusations that they've made.
Well, and my understanding is that one of the 2 defendants has made allegations that the other is not. I read the allegations. The allegations were fairly vague, non-specific, didn't provide a lot of information. I can tell you that what you're suggesting, such as a perjury case, is one of the hardest things to prove that someone is actually lying with knowledge. Okay, so no, that's typically not what we would do. Typically, we would look at the allegations. What's more important here is looking at the allegations and determining, is there someone else? Because we want to know. We don't want to cut off the investigation at 2 if there are actually 4 or 5, 10 Bakersfield Police Department officers who are dirty and are involved in this criminal conduct. But what kept coming back and coming back is there's nothing here. There's no further detail. There's nothing that supports, no evidence that supports what these allegations are. And in fact, right in front of us, the one making the allegation is one of the 2 who are culpable criminally.
At this point of your investigation, is your office making any recommendation of improvements in the Bakersfield Police Department?
No, that's not. So this is a criminal investigation of drug trafficking. That's what our laser focus is, and as I mentioned, the investigation remains open.
Chief, in Demasio Diaz's white paper that you filed, he talked about taking drugs out of the evidence room for control buys and switching it out with lookalike substances. Obviously, are there deficiencies in that process, and if so, how are those being addressed?
Well, I believe we're looking at the processes that we have with our narcotics unit and seizing and booking narcotics evidence. I believe we've been working with the DEA for quite some time now on the revision of our policies, and this was at our request, but at the suggestion also of the DEA that we rotate our policies and we keep them fresh. We thought we, until this was uncovered, had a pretty airtight policy, but we found that these individuals working clandestinely and away from work without supervision, off-duty hours, were able to skirt the policies and procedures that we had in place. So we will address that. We have been addressing our policy as we move forward, and we're notified of that. Thank you.
Take questions from Olivia and Ken on this side, and then you guys will have an opportunity afterward. Okay? Let them ask their questions.
Mr. Delaney, I am wondering, why did you agree to a plea bargain in this case? Why not take it to trial to win more convictions?
Which with both defendants?
Yes.
They pled to the most serious charges the federal government can bring against anybody, including a police officer. Each charge that the charge to what Mr. Diaz pled to were 3 charges, obviously. That was returned in an indictment. One of those charges carried a mandatory minimum of 10 years up to life. So the next question is, why didn't he get 10 years if it has a mandatory minimum? It's because Mr. Diaz agreed to cooperate with the United States. And as a result of that cooperation, that gives the judge the authority to sentence below the mandatory minimum. Mara also was charged with the most serious charge we can bring. It was the sale and distribution of methamphetamine. That carries, once again, a 10-year to life sentence. Once again, he received a sentence under 10 years because of his cooperation, and both of them have cooperated, have substantially assisted the United States, and our investigation is going forward with their cooperation to this date. Does that answer what?
So what would you say the government got out of the plea deal then?
The government got, well, one is we have two corrupt police officers who are no longer practicing police corruption, no longer working within the police department. We got a sentence of 5 years. They're going to go away to prison for 5 years, which is, as my boss, Mr. Talbert, said, that's a serious sentence as a police officer. It may not have been the sentence. They have given up the proceeds that they earned from their illegal conduct. Mr. Diaz gave up $128,000. We have received that cash. So the benefit of what he did is gone. They no longer will serve in a capacity of trust within the community. Their lives, if you were at the sentencing, you see how shattered their lives have become, and what an effect that had on their families. And I think the Bakersfield Police Department is a better police department today without those 2 officers working there. So we got something out of it, yes.
Did you make an effort to, I guess this would be a question for everyone, to express to the judge that the allegations that Damasio Diaz laid out in that letter to the assistant chief that was submitted prior to his sentence, that those allegations were found to be untrue? Because I would think that would have an effect on his plea deal if he wasn't being completely truthful and cooperative.
Look, what was our investigation? Public corruption regarding the sale and distribution of drugs, the receiving of monies from a criminal informant, allowing that criminal informant to pass in criminal conduct and tipping him off, hurting one of our wiretap. Those are what we are investigating. The allegations as to officers drinking, that's not a federal offense. Those are things that can be handled internally by the police department. The truth to those things, I have no idea. What we're looking for is stopping the kind of serious federal crimes that were conducted by these defendants, and the other allegations are peripheral from our point of view from the federal government.
Chief Williamson, are those other allegations that aren't federal offenses, are those being investigated by your department?
I think that's what I was speaking about earlier. They've been investigated. They've been unfounded.
Do you know everything that they did? Did anything more come out in the investigation that those 2 former officers had been involved with, or just what they admitted to people? Was it really just that date to that date, or once they were investigated, more came out about what they did?
I think we had a pretty complete investigation. If you read the indictments, they're what we call speaking indictments. They pretty well set forth out the criminal conduct that we had uncovered, and I think I'm confident that our investigation has correctly found those that were responsible for the conduct, had them convicted, had them punished. As I mentioned, There is an investigation as to where the drugs went after Mara and Diaz got them. Obviously, they went to a third party for distribution into our community, and that's where our investigation is going. So we are confident that we have gotten down to the root of the criminal conduct. Yes.
Has there been any movement on where they might be spending their sentence yet?
I have no idea. They both asked to spend them in the Southwest California area. So that's up to the Bureau of Prisons to make those decisions.
Okay, so again, thank you everybody for coming. Thank you for all the to all the representatives of the Bakersfield Police Department. City Council Member Parlier, I see you back there. Thank you for coming and supporting us. And one thing we want to resonate through the media and through the community is that there was no widespread corruption found within our organization. So now the Chief and maybe some federal representatives will stay behind and answer any questions one-on-one. Thank you.
Well, hello.